Hello and welcome to Tartan Touchdown, Scotland's voice in conversation in the world of American football. I'm Sarah. I am delighted to be joined by only one, sadly, of my co-hosts this week. It's Gav. Gav, how are you?
Hey, how's it going, Sarah? Yeah, good to be back. Yeah, smaller group this week, but plenty to get through all the same. So look forward to it.
I know. We should point out Dan is not asleep, because I feel like that will be our running commentary now, but Dan is not asleep. We are recording actually at a nice point in the day that I actually can see my screen, which is always good. It's nice to not be in the darkness, but it's okay. The January is halfway done, so we're almost through it. But yeah, we've got a lot to talk about in terms of games running for the Wildcard Weekend, so I say let's just get started with the first one. So the Texans and the Chargers. Now, in Tartan Touchdown, obviously, if you listened to the episode last week, we all made predictions. We all got this one wrong, as the Texans absolutely stormed the Chargers in something that I don't think anybody could see coming. I don't think even when you looked at in terms of what other people were predicting, other pros were suggesting, none of us really saw it coming. So, Gav, do you have any thoughts on how they did it?
No, I mean, I think, like you say, this is the one that caught us all by surprise. And I guess if we're looking at the recipe for the Texans' success, or should that be maybe the recipe for the Chargers' downfall, it came to the turnovers. So the big story is actually how well Justin Herbert done this season looking after the football. He had 3 interceptions in the entirety of the 2024 regular season. He threw 4 interceptions on Saturday alone. So I think there's a lot that you can put down just to turning the ball over. I do feel bad going after Herbert alone in this, because there were a few of those interceptions that hit receivers in the hands, but it still goes against the quarterback. But nevertheless, whether you're talking about your quarterback play or just your offense as a whole, if you turn the football over, you're going to give yourself a really difficult time in the postseason.
Yeah, I think they could just see it. I think the Texans defense were absolutely unstoppable, because even at the beginning of the game, it was so defensive played from either side. And the first time he threw an interception, it was like it was game over. It just totally all lost. The Texans defense just suddenly went, right, we're in this. If we can keep getting him to do it, we can steal this from them, which is essentially what they did. I mean, CJ threw completed 22 of 33 passes for 282 yards and a touchdown. It wasn't exactly a stellar performance from him, but it wasn't out of the question. And it's second consecutive year they've now done it. No one thought they would. So
I think it's also about doing the basic things really well. So actually, and it became a bit of a theme as the weekend went on, but just relying on your ground game and being able to put the game away. So actually, Joe Mixon had struggled early on in that game, but what we saw is actually the Texans mounted a lengthy drive. Mixon got that last touchdown to put the game to bed, and I think that's something that you really want to be able to do, is to keep the game in your own hands, be masters of your own destiny. When you're going down the stretch, because as we've seen, funny things can happen.
Yeah. Well, speaking of keeping it on the ground and running, will we move forward and talk about the Ravens and the Steelers, as if by magic that segue? I mean, we all thought the Ravens would win this. I mean, I know Dan was teetering on the edge of the Steelers winning it. But yeah, initial kind of reactions post game for this one, Gav.
Yeah, I mean, as you see, it wasn't a surprise, but you always kind of hold out that thought in your head that, AFC North and particularly Ravens Steelers usually tend to be really tough matchups. But actually what we saw was the Ravens jumping out to a big lead early on. I think they're 21-0 up at one point in the first half. And yes, the Steelers came back in to put some points on the board, but really the Ravens did what we thought they would, particularly Derrick Henry. Again, relying on that running game, racking the yardage up. And I think no surprise that they're now onto the divisional round.
And potentially the best matchup this weekend we'll see coming up. You're totally right. As expected, it falls. I mean, I think the Steelers did good. It wasn't necessarily a bad performance. I just think that running game was too strong for their defense to really compute. And then obviously we had the Bills and the Broncos. Again, I don't think there's a shock there. Maybe a shock in how little the Broncos could do, I think was maybe a bit shocking, just because it was 31-7, and it just seemed to nothing ever seemed to click with them this week.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is, again, sometimes the scores in these playoff games are a little bit deceptive, and what we did see for long stretches was probably what you'd call a stubborn performance from the Broncos. I mean, it was only 10-7 going into the half, but then in the second half, Buffalo outscores Denver 21-0. I think that's where the experience and the class really started to show at the end of the football. It's a 60-minute game. And yeah, the Bills just kept powering through.
Do you think, I mean, obviously they say that, it's a very interesting one when I was talking about MVP, they say that the playoffs don't matter, but you can't win MVP unless you make it to the playoffs. Do you think that performance kind of helped Josh Allen on the journey, or do you think that...
I certainly don't think it hindered him at all. I mean, we've probably seen higher scoring games from Josh Allen, whether it's fantasy football or even clocking up the real world stats. But I think what we're seeing here is, and that was always the knock on Josh Allen in previous seasons, is I guess those mistakes. He's always been a bit of a gunslinger at quarterback, but actually, he threw 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, no fumbles. He chipped in on the ground, didn't actually get any rushing touchdowns this week, but he played, again, mistake-free football, and also still had a bit of space in there for a bit of magic. I think I'm going to nominate the touchdown throw to Ty Johnson for my Tartan touchdown of the week, because that was, I think that was incredible work by both men. Josh Allen just in terms of extending the play, and then obviously Johnson really doing the work to keep his feet in. I know who you ask and what team they support. They're going to argue about whether or not he was in. I do think he was in, and yeah, obviously, getting the hands down, keeping the knees down, and in this case, the feet up so that they didn't go out of bounds. That just showed tremendous awareness for me, and that was a real highlight from what was a comfortable win for the Bills.
Always nice when they throw something in just to keep the suspense going. I guess it makes maybe a one-sided game a bit more exciting for everybody watching at home. But yeah, no, great win for the Bills. Looking forward, obviously, to this weekend, which we'll talk about very soon. Jump over to the NFC, as obviously the AFC games all played and then the NFC games all followed, and we'll talk about the Eagles and the Packers. So again, Dan got this wrong. I'm sorry to say, he was wrong again. Just to point out, me and Gav are 4-6 for predictions. Dan is 3-6. Sorry, Dan. That's actually why he couldn't show his face today, because he knew we would just take the piss out of him.
I think in Dan's defence, and I did call out this last week, I think his prediction in this one was tainted a bit with PTSD of last season and seeing what a 7th seed Packers can come and do. Unfortunately for him, the Eagles are not the Cowboys, who are still the only 2 seed to lose to the 7th seed on Wildcard Weekend. So it's only been 5 years, but that's one postseason claim to fame for Dallas.
That's the one that Tans can currently fall upon at the moment, which I don't think is good for anybody. But I was really surprised at how well the Eagles defense did this week. This was always the one which we were hung on over. How will they pull out? Obviously, Jalen Hurts coming back from injury. But I was really surprised. I was really impressed with the defense. I don't think we've seen a lot from them recently in terms of really stopping the running game and really being there to, stop the ball from being caught, all of these kind of things. And yeah, I was shocked. And Jalen was pretty no mistakes, no faults. Passing game was good. Which I was surprised.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, because the story for this game is the Eagles jumped out to an early lead. They basically stole a possession, getting that fumble in the opening kickoff, and very quickly got themselves into lead. But you have Jalen Hurts, who's coming back from a couple of weeks out injured, and he did struggle. There was a long stretch in that game where, he was throwing, I think, sort of second and third quarter combined, he was something like 30 yards passing. It wasn't good from that perspective, but having had that early platform built for them, the Packers themselves, again, similar situation, Jordan Love coming back from injury, and he probably had it worse because the good thing you could say about Hurts' performance, he wasn't turning the ball over. On the other hand, we've got Jordan Love with 3 interceptions. I mean, the one I've got to say was a particularly special play from Darius Slay to get his interception, but obviously, you turn the ball over in these tight postseason games where field position is going to be a factor. Then, of course, turnovers really have a massive impact, and it's only really late in the third quarter before Green Bay get any points at all. Fourth quarter before they find the end zone, and that was through Josh Jacobs, who had a solid, if not spectacular game. But I think you're right. I mean, they always say defense wins championships, and I think it really was the strength of the Eagles on Sunday.
Yeah, it'd be interesting now though, because obviously you mentioned Darius Slay, and he seems to obviously be injured now. And then Dean's also injured for them. So do you think that'll have an impact, or like how much of an impact that might have on them moving into this week?
Absolutely. I mean, I think looking at obviously the potential opponents going forward, you look at the Rams. That's the one team we know the Eagles will definitely face next, and they are in a bit of a rhythm at the moment. Obviously, you've got Cooper Kupp in particular, Puka Nacua to contend with, but thinking ahead to what you might be facing the conference championship, and more likely than not, alluding to my preview picks, with the Lions, that is a high-scoring offense. You look at what's on on the other side in the AFC, should you get to the Super Bowl with the Chiefs and the Bills in particular, or Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, any pieces that you lose in defense is going to be a big impact for you. But having said that, I don't think we should write anyone off, because if we look at, certainly how the Lions have managed their injuries, it can be done. And that's where it comes down to the strength of your bench, the strength of coaching, your coordinators. So, it'll definitely be a loss for the Eagles, but let's see how they handle it.
How they handle it, obviously, moving forward. Well, one of the teams they could play is the Commanders, who bet out the Buccaneers, which we again all got this wrong.
Yeah.
Probably the most thrilling game of the weekend, I would say. A 23-20 upset. You're getting right down to the wire and winning on a field goal kick. It's so reminiscent of the Bengals. It's unbelievable. But yeah, so Jaden completed 24-35 passes for 268 yards with 2 touchdowns, and he led the team in rushing and 36 yards. So I think it was a stellar show out from the rookie quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that maybe is a bit of a theme from Wildcard Weekend as a whole. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I think the Wildcards could be my favourite weekend of the season. It's where I guess everything resets. Every game has stakes. But at the same time, anything feels possible. Sometimes we get late into the playoffs and actually the matchups just they seem to follow. But as we've seen, we had a few upsets across the weekend, and most of the other matches, they were fairly decisive in terms of the final scores. This is one where the outcome was in doubt right till the end. The Commanders trailing going into the fourth quarter. So I think I certainly don't want to do down the other games, because I don't think they were bad, but certainly in terms of excitement for 60 minutes, this is one that certainly delivered. I think we all thought that Baker Mayfield was going to be, certainly I said that Baker Mayfield was going to be the talisman for the Buccaneers, and really he again, for most of the game, he'd protected the protected the football, I should say. But when it came down to that was the downfall, getting that late fourth quarter fumble. Obviously, put the Bucks in a bit of a bind.
I know. Isn't playoff weekend, wildcard weekend, lovely when you don't have any stakes in it? You just get to sit back and enjoy it.
It's definitely less stressful. That's for sure. It's not something I get to experience all that often as a Giants.
Yeah, I mean, me either. It's been one, it's been two, and that's really all. In the time that I've known of the Jags, it's been 2 playoff appearances. So, I mean, I did have the most exciting game that's ever happened in a wildcard weekend, so it's fine. I'll take that as I come. Sorry, Justin Herbert. And then moving on to, I mean, I know Gav shares some. I think we both share some opinions on Monday night wildcard weekends.
Yeah.
That in terms of maybe growth for the game, it seems a bit silly to eliminate an entire kind of broad part of your audience.
Yeah, I think we've seen probably with the, particularly with the Netflix Christmas Day game where you're broadcasting worldwide at a time that suits both, Central Europe as well as your American markets. I think the first year that they went with the 6-match wildcard weekend, they actually put a triple header on the Saturdays, and then triple header as they still do on the Sundays. And I guess to me, that's my question is, yes, Monday Night Football has been that great American tradition, but it's probably the least favourite fixture of the week for fans pretty much anywhere else in the world. And to me, I'm thinking, well, are you shifting the needle really by taking a game away from what is a 1 p.m. on a Saturday and putting it on to Monday night in the States? I think they probably are missing a trick there in terms of doing that. So I'm hoping, you see with the growth of the international series and just out of pure selfishness, that maybe this is something we return to in the future and get the triple header Saturday back. Because, I'm not going to lie, I did not stay up for last night.
No. I mean, I did not stay up for this either. And after watching the highlights, sort of glad I didn't. Because I don't think I think I would have probably fallen asleep again because it's Monday night. Like I'm in for agreements. I think Monday night football is the worst slot to be in if you don't live in the US. I think Thursday night football you can maybe get away with. Majority of people maybe work from home on a Friday. Some people only do a 4-day week and don't work on a Friday. So I think you can sort of get away with being up late on a Thursday night. But a Monday night is a killer. I think no one watches that.
Yeah, you've already had the slog of going back to work, and then you've got to battle through Monday night football, especially a game like that, and then 4 more days. So let's sort that out. NFL. Let's get back to triple header.
Just get back to triple header. Saturday, Sunday, done. But yeah, so kind of the big takeaways from last night's game again was that Rams defense. So they tie the NFL playoff record with 9 sacks.
Yeah.
They sacked Sam Darnold the amount of points that the Vikings got, which is a scary stat.
Yeah.
And then you obviously, so at 24-3, Rams were up, and they essentially just kind of, the defense then just held it out and said, that's fine, we can work with this now. Constant pressure for Sam Darnold. It was obviously, he was taking absolute hits. Even when he wasn't being sacked, he was getting hit really hard. And you could sort of see him, after the next play was happening, and you were sort of seeing him not really kind of knowing what he was going. So, I mean, I'm shocked there was no concussion protocol brought in there just with the amount he was being hit. And then I think as well, obviously we played the game in Arizona last night due to the LA wildfires. And I feel like that was maybe also a help for the Rams, as there seemed to be a big push from the fans that come out to see them, and it felt like you were in LA for it.
That's right. I mean, there's obviously a big effort, and I think the Cardinals have been recognised as well for their support and making it feel like a home game. Obviously, you had all the logos on the field, the graphics and the stadium, video packages. So I think that definitely is a factor, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the Rams in particular do next week. And the reason that I say this is because we talk a lot about emotional wins and how that can give a team a big boost and a big surge. But with that comes a big, drain on mental energy. You can do that one week. Can you do that a second week? And I think the Rams have been slow starters this season. So I think that they have, they've clearly improved as the season has gone on. And they've, I guess, upset what most people expected. Not us. We did predict this win, but I will say I did think the disruption, it had me swithering more about kind of leaning towards the Vikings. But the Rams have been certainly a dangerous team, but I do wonder if this is kind of like their Super Bowl, beating that 15-2, 14-3 Vikings side. I do just kind of wonder if that's kind of the big result for the Rams, and now Philadelphia will be a bridge too far from them. Remains to be seen.
No.
But coming back to the wildcard game, and the stories coming out of that, I think I do feel a little bad for Sam Darnold, just in the sense that I do think there's been a lot of people who've been waiting for him to slip up this year. And I think that for the most part, he's proved the doubters wrong. The sad thing from his perspective is that it's gone wrong at the wrong time in the two biggest games of the season. Obviously, first of all, against the Lions, where, yes, you're in the playoffs either way, but you're playing for the one seed. He didn't show up. And then same again on Monday night. He had a rough time against the Rams. So now you have a situation where obviously the NFL draft is a little over 3 months away, and the quarterback draft class, yes, there's a lot said about Shedeur Sanders, about Cam Ward, but most people would say that it's not the strongest class. And you have the Vikings sitting with two quarterbacks. You have J.J. McCarthy, who you spent a first-round pick on last year, but he's still an unknown quantity. And on the other hand, you have Sam Darnold, who, yes, has not shown up in the biggest games, but he has also got you to that 14-3 regular season record. So is this a case of better the devil you know, and you stick with Sam, or do you think, well, JJ was always the plan, we're going to go with him? I think there's going to be a lot of phone calls coming into Minnesota, probably about both guys, actually. But it will be very interesting to see, first of all, who makes those calls, but also who the Vikings would prefer to stick with. So, yeah, it's definitely a situation to keep an eye on. Certainly, I've absolutely got skin in that game as a Giants fan to see if they'll be a part of that. So it's just one we're going to have to wait and see as it develops.
I know, and it'll be interesting then to see who they pick potentially out of the two of them, and then if there's any repercussions that fall from that out with the quarterback part of the Vikings. Does that then fall? What does Justin Jefferson do? What do the other key players in the Vikings do?
Yeah.
Because obviously they all say that it's a team game, and they want to go where they want to feel like they're being used and utilised correctly. Mm-hmm. So I think that will be an interesting point in the Vikings camp to see what.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I obviously, players, they've got to do what's best for them and their circumstances. But if you're looking at Minnesota as a situation, I generally be thinking, why would you be walking away from that? You have a core there. There's very few alternative situations I think that you would rather be in. Yes, they didn't get the. They obviously, they're out, they're done. They didn't get the one seed, but compared to how the vast majority of the league have performed and how you're positioned for next season, both in terms of the playing and the coaching staff, That's probably it's one that I would probably be reluctant to walk away from as a player if I had an offer on the table.
I would be raking in it, so of course you'd stay. Yeah, I mean, it would be a different life, wouldn't it? But shall we? Oh, sorry. We should also point out Dan got that one wrong, and that we were right. Thanks, everybody. So moving forward and looking ahead to this weekend, so we'll start in the order that they fall upon. So we start off with the Houston Texans at Kansas City against the Chiefs. The Chiefs' main first strings have not played in about 3 weeks at this point. Gav, give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I just general rule when I'm looking at playoff predictions, the same last weekend with the wild cards and again this weekend with the divisionals. I always try to look at the round and think, where is the upset? And I'm sorry, it's not here in this game, I'm afraid. The Chiefs have already beaten the Texans this season. I think the Texans got their big win last week. They proved the doubters wrong. And I guess, there's no expectations in them from, I think, anyone out with that bubble. I'm sure they'll have full confidence in themselves. So there's nothing really to lose from their perspective. But I just think that in terms of the consistency of play that we've seen from the Texans, I think that you're up against the side of the Chiefs who always find a way to win. I think we definitely have our questions about them if they're really the dominant side that they've been previously. But I think Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, they will have enough to get past the Houston Texans at home.
Yeah, the only thing I could maybe see is if the Texans defense can show up when needed to again, or can get that first takeaway, we maybe might see a bit more of a pressure on Patrick Mahomes. And that'll be the crucial win. I don't think, as we were talking earlier, that it's defense that wins you. And I think that that will be how the Texans win this, is their defense continuing to step up. But Kansas City's favourite by 8 points, and I'm going to have to keep with it, I think, is the likely outcome. I don't see it changing, unfortunately. Sorry, Texans. Moving to the Commanders at Lions. So currently the Lions are 8.5 point favourites against the Commanders. I think, again, I don't think this will be an upset. I think that the Lions will win this. The balanced offense, David Montgomery is supposed to come back and be at full pell. I think that I just don't see Washington being able to hold off that. But I think Jaden Daniels does have that Joe threat capability that I think will test the Lions' defense.
Yeah.
But I don't think it'll be a blowout. But I don't think it will be an unexpected win.
Here. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, just in terms of even just the feel of the game. Yes, some of these matchups were pretty decisive eventually, but I think that we could see a situation where the Commanders, they hang around that a little bit longer into the game, and that in itself creates, I guess, an anxiety and nerves, and particularly in the home support. You get big expectations coming as the one seed, and then things don't quite go your way if the crowd gets up in your back. So I think that I think it could be tighter than people expect. I mean, obviously, Vegas and the bookies expecting to be more than a touchdown in it, and it might well end up that way eventually. But if I'm looking at where we're at half time into the third quarter, it could be a tight one. But again, similar to what we said about the Chiefs a few moments ago, the Lions, we all know what that injury report has looked like over the course of the year, and they still find a way to win. And I think that it's one seed against 6 seeds here, and the Lions now have that postseason experience, and that experience crucially winning in the postseason that they haven't before. So I think that that's something that they can look back on from the previous campaign, whereas obviously this is going to be a new setting for most of the Commanders players. So, it's certainly not a hot take, but I'm taking the Lions in this one as well.
Oh God! Right, everybody, get your money on the Commanders. This will be it now. We've done it. We've done it now. And then looking, the two next games obviously going to be the Rams at the Eagles. Again, Philly is favoured in this game because they previously have beaten the Rams this season, 34-20. Dan. I'm thinking of Dan. I'm thinking about the Cowboys. What I'm talking about in the next section. Jesus, Gav. Sorry. What do you think about this one?
Yeah, so I think, and maybe I've started to tip my hand to some of the picks here, but I think that there's a couple of factors in play here. First of all, when I look at the Rams and I think about, how they did last night, getting past the Vikings and really kind of powered on by that fuel and motion, I think that's great, but I think there's a drain that comes with that. Also, you've got that classic situation of the West Coast team coming across the East Coast, so you've got home field advantage for Philly, you've got travel for the Rams. And I think if, we talked about it in recap of the wildcard game, the kind of fundamental pieces that you need to win in the postseason, we saw from Philadelphia. We had the big show up by the defense for the Eagles, but also that running game, which has been there all season long with Saquon Barkley in his 2,000-yard season. It was there again on Sunday night. And crucially, it was there at the end of the game when you need to close the game out. They were putting together lengthy drives to milk the clock and just shut that game off. And even obviously at the very end, you saw that the smarts from Saquon, multiple scores ahead, but when he breaks that run to get the game clinching first down, you just get down, because even if you score, you give the ball back, you give them a chance. It might be a small one, but you give them a chance. And I just think that the Eagles will have too much for the Rams in this one.
Yeah, I agree. I know we're just agreeing on everything, I think, this week. I can't believe how clever of a player Saquon Barkley is. Like, I think he's so clever. It was when he slid down there and everyone was like, everyone was asking him at the end, and he was just like, well, I don't want to give him the ball back. I want to close it out. I don't want to be injured. I don't want any of these things. And I was like, that's just so incredibly clever, because anybody could have just continued to run and got the touchdown and got the glory. And I think it was Tom Brady was doing his post-game interview, and he was just like, that was an incredibly smart play. Mm-hmm. And maybe he's learned maybe he's learned from different organisations about that. But if you'd like the fun stat, he ran 302 yards in their previous meeting against the Rams. So if that maybe doesn't hint at what could happen, we'll never know. But moving to the MVP absolute showdown of the week, annoyingly, probably going to be the best game, Sunday night football. So
late Sunday night football at that.
Late Sunday night football. So as much as I would love to, I don't think I'll make it through Monday if I stay up for this. I think this is going to be a tight game. I don't know if we think it will be high scoring. I don't know if it will be low scoring. I just think either way it falls, it's going to be close. But Gav, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think this is where we're going to diverge here. I really, really, really want to see Josh Allen get to Super Bowl. I just have a horrible, horrible feeling that I think the Ravens have already beaten them quite comfortably, and admittedly much earlier in the season. But I think that there's maybe been an element of Josh Allen carrying the Bills and taking that team on his back. And yes, you need people to, catch the ball. You need people to block for you. It is still a team game. But I think that he's been doing some incredible things. And I just think that there's probably more established pieces in that Ravens team. You talk about Lamar, you talk about Derrick Henry. There's multiple ways that they can hurt you as a team. And don't get me wrong, I think Lamar's record is in the postseason is 1-3. So I think, there's two stories actually coming to this one. There's how these guys obviously will do in the MVP race, but also the fact that they've not had the greatest amount of success so far in their careers in January games. So I think that's going to be a really interesting one to see, but I think it's going to be tight. But my head in this one is saying it's going to be Baltimore that actually goes on to Kansas City.
Okay. Well, I will go different, and we will oppose this, and I will say that I think the Bills could do it. I could really go either way, and honestly, I would be happy with either way. I don't have a stake in this in terms of, I think I would like one to go on more. I think either of them could upset the Chiefs if we are both correct and the Chiefs make it through to the championship game. But it'll be interesting to see how Zay Flowers does, obviously, because that obviously limits Baltimore's passing attack. And it'll be down to both their defenses, I guess, and who can contain both those quarterbacks, because both Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson are movemental quarterbacks. They will go if they need to go. They will run if they need to run. And it will be, can the defense spot that coming, and can they stop what they're doing to notice that happening? So I think that'll be.
Yeah, I think that's probably the big thing at this time of year, isn't it? We're wanting to see a real classic battle between these two. Well, between all 8 teams, to be honest. But I think everyone's got this particular matchup ringed as the one where we're hoping to see some fireworks. So let's just hope they deliver.
Hope, and we can see David versus Goliath in the championship game, and who can do it. Well, moving on, I guess, to any other kind of news roundups. It's not been that much. It's been quite quiet this week in terms of anything outside really the playoffs. I guess the big news is that Mike McCarthy is leaving the Cowboys. Which, with interesting notes, we asked Dan for a couple of his new head coach picks. But before we came online, Gav was talking some interesting thoughts about the kind of decision, obviously, to step by for Mike.
So I think this is where it's interesting. So obviously last week we talked a lot about Black Monday, and obviously that's when coaches get fired. Mike McCarthy is a different situation. Now, coming into this season, we knew that he was going to the final year of his contract, and we also knew that the Packers had absolutely demolished Dallas in last year's Wildcard Weekend. So, he was a coach on the hot seat. But when push came to shove, there was no announcement. He wasn't terminated. And actually, what we found out as the situation developed is that there was an attempt made by Jerry Jones to keep Mike McCarthy. And I think what you've got to think about there is there's obviously various head coaching vacancies on offer. And it doesn't sound like McCarthy has any plans on retiring or even going doing TV for a year. He is exploring some of these opportunities. So I think that says a lot about the Dallas Cowboys, who I think we would certainly say are a more successful team than most of the head coaching vacancies on offer. But there's issues that come along with that. I think there's baggage. The Cowboys are a team that are very good at getting to the playoffs, and without chuckling too much in this, I think both Sarah and I have had more post-season success in our fandom than Dan has. So I think there is a point about for McCarthy, if you go back there, what's to gain from that situation? And then you look at some of these other head coaching situations where, some of them are in big markets. You've got the Jets in New York, you've got Chicago, again, not a small market. But there's an opportunity. The Jets do have good pieces. They've got Breece Hall, they've got Garrett Wilson. They may be able to keep Devontae Adams, who's worked with McCarthy before. Again, in Chicago, you have that young quarterback in Caleb Williams. You've got Rome Odunze, receiver Cole Kmet. You've got running backs. So there is something to work with in quite a few of these situations. Sarah, I don't know if you want to try and sell the Jags to Mike on this one, but yeah, if you're weighing up your options as a head coach, there's obviously something elsewhere. But I think it does say a lot about a team like Dallas, who are, self-proclaimed America's team, that they can't keep their head coach, because that's actually what happened in here in this situation. The head coach walked away.
Yeah, which is and walking away from the dynasty essentially, and that they are the biggest team in the US. Like, that's what they proclaim. And it'll be interesting to see where he ends up, and it'll be interesting to see how he performs as a head coach somewhere else. And if it is well, does that then look bad upon? Do we then continue to have discussions on Jerry Jones and how the Cowboys are being ran and all of the problems that come with that? Yeah. But it'll be interesting to see who they end up with. We asked Dan for a couple of little selections of who he wanted. So he mentioned Marcus Freeman, who obviously is Notre Dame's. He did mention Bill Belichick, which we were having a discussion about before he came on, that apparently, had he have known sooner that McCarthy would be going, that he would have been interested in going to the Cowboys. Whether or not I believe that, I don't know. There's some other suggestions because he's not really put in any coaching staff for the University of North Carolina yet. Will he come out with a $10 million contract? Who knows? It's
an interesting situation, but following from that coaching tree, one of the examples we talked about is Belichick would probably do well to learn from his mentor Bill Parcells, coached together at the Giants and in New England. And he went on to the Cowboys. And again, similar situation. This is about 20 years ago. Got them to the playoffs. Didn't take them any further than that. There's big expectations. You have a guy who has won 6 rings. You can say about how much of that was Brady and other factors, but he is one of the most successful, the most successful head coach in NFL history. What's to gain from going to Dallas? That would be my big question. You have this opportunity to do something different at North Carolina in world college coaching. I guess we'll just need to wait and see. But I think what is maybe an interesting parallel, and there's not been a lot of noise about this yet, but maybe one to keep your eye on also is, we talk about that great sort of legacy dynasty because they've not won much in recent years, but in the Cowboys. But Pittsburgh, Mike Tomlin has been in that role for, I think, 20 years now, and has never had a losing season. But he's also not had a lot of success in the postseason recently. So he has got a very high floor, but he's not really breaking through that ceiling. And there maybe is a question for Steelers ownership. Are you happy with that level of consistency? Maybe you are, but if you want to go to the next level, are you going to have to try and shake things up?
Well, Mike Tomlin was one of Dan's other picks. If the Steelers move on from him, maybe he would perform quite well there. Again, he's got the experience to get to the playoffs. Does he just need something else to push you through the playoffs?
Yeah.
So that maybe would be an interesting one. Obviously, I think the big main contenders, which have been kind of floating about for other head coach positions, I think are just too expensive for Jerry Jones. I just don't see him giving up the picks for it. So he'll maybe go for somebody that's a bit older, who's maybe not as in demand. Yeah. I guess, because when you just look at, whoever is doing Ben Johnson's admin work, whoever had that assistant is, they have been booked and busy this week, trying to get them all sorted in for all these interviews he's been doing.
Yeah, I think it's a very specialist situation. I think you would say for Dallas. Again, they have enough there to get reasonably far. But in terms of going to the next level, it's about what do you do with the rest of that roster, because there's so much money sunk into both Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb that your kind of opportunities for making moves in free agency they're not minimal, but they are limited. So how are you going to get the best out your squad and be able to compete and get into those postseason games and go further? That's, I guess, the big question from me.
Well, I'll be excited to see where they announce that Mike McCarthy is interviewing, because he'll need to start doing it quickly, because he's behind everybody else, especially behind everybody who's obviously still in the playoffs as per the rules of interviewing, which I don't really fully understand, but fine. And I guess that's really it. Apart from we've interviewed 4 people. Great, congratulations, guys. Hopefully one of you has walked in and said you need to get rid of Balky and I'll come in. as that's what, as Can said that he would consider it if somebody gave a good enough case. And then I did read on X, and I don't like to go into X too much. It's a big scary place. But somebody did say, apparently Ben Johnson did say in his interview that he would happily have Balky pick the draft pick with him, and then Balky could then leave, and Johnson would bring out in his own
graceful exit. Give him a graceful exit.
Yeah, exactly. Give him, let him pick it, and then go, okay, now you can go, and we'll bring in another GM. And do you know what? I would clap and cheer for that. That would be fine by me. But yes, so I'd just like to thank Gav for joining. What a lovely conversation. Let's hope that we can continue. We can continue our winning streak for our predictions, and Dan can continue to sit at the bottom. Excitingly, we have more conversations coming up, so we will also be highlighting them, so please keep an eye out on all our socials for those coming up. We do have a very special one coming up this week, which me and Gav are super excited for, to have discussions with this incredible player, and we can't wait to highlight them a bit more to a wider audience. But yeah, thanks so much for joining again, and that's us, so goodbye for now.
See you later.